How you guys doing? My name is Shahid Bakar, and this is my presentation for EDU 304 with St. Leo's University. This presentation is about behavior disorder disability. We'll talk about its definitions, its characteristics, and how it manifests itself in the classroom and outside of the classroom for that matter. Um, the reason I chose behavioral disorder disability is because of my background. I did 13 years in law enforcement. Um, Before that, I always wanted to be a teacher. Um, when I left law enforcement, I became a paraprofessional, and I found myself that I had a love for the students that had behavioral issues. And at the time, I didn't know that it was a disability. I just thought that it was an issue that can be dealt with discipline. Um, so for the last 3 years, I've worked one on one with students with behavioral disability. And in those 3 years, I've learned so much. The most profound thing that I've learned is that this is a disability and it's not an issue that students have because of a lack of discipline or because they have a bad attitude. That this is a disability, and I'm going to stress that over and over again in this presentation because as you get educated about behavioral disorder disability, that is the most important and profound thing that you must know, that this is a disability. It is not an issue that students have. I work with two students. One was a 12-year-old African-American boy. He was the first one that I worked with. I worked closely with his mother. The school that I was working with, they kind of handed him off to me with very little information because they didn't necessarily know how to deal with him. So I took the young man under my wing, and I'll be honest with you, I made many mistakes in the learning process. But eventually, talking to him, I realized that that this young man was suffering from a disability, and it was frustrating to him that he was unable to beat this disability. Um, and that's where I started to grow as a educator and as a person, honestly. The next person I worked with was a 15-year-old female who, she had a disability, a behavior disorder, and she was violent. I still currently, to this day, I still work with her, and I have issues on it. Some days are good, some days are bad, but I'm learning that these are disabilities, and it's not anger. So when a lot of my coworkers, they look at me and they're like, "How do you put up with this?" I put up with it and I deal with her behavior because I realize that it is a disability. She's no different than the students that are in a wheelchair, and because of that, she needs love. She needs compassion, and you have to have patience with her, and patience with trying to do the different strategies to be successful with her. I think that's the main point that I have to speak about in the behavior disorder disability. You have to have patience. You have to have love. It's not for everybody, but those that it's not for um, need to get out of the way and let those that have the patience to work with these students um, try to affect change in their lives. What is behavioral disorder? Behavior disorder has been defined as a condition existing of one or more of the following characteristics over a long period of time that adversely affects the child's educational performance. These characteristics are the inability to connect, the inability that cannot be explained by intellect, sensory, or health factors. Another one is the inability to build or maintain a satisfactory interpersonal relationship with peers and teachers. I wrote blame next to this note. What I found is a lot of these students, they want to blame the other student or the other person, and they don't want to admit their action. Um, Maybe that's part of the disability why they can't, whatever synapses, whatever is firing off in their brain, maybe they can't admit blame. Third, an inappropriate type of behavior or feeling under normal circumstances. Um, in the classroom, when you're talking about slavery per se, uh, there's a certain emotion that a student that does not have a disability, a behavior disability, is going to display. Unless they're cold-hearted, the normal student will feel sympathy, um, even if it's fake. In a classroom setting, they're going to express some kind of sympathy. The student that I had, the young boy, he was in the 7th grade. We were going over civics. We were talking about the slave trade, and he burst out laughing. The reason as I learned more, the reason he burst out laughing is that there was an uncomfortableness in the somber of the classroom. So to battle his uncomfortableness, he began to laugh. Of course, the teacher lashed out at him. He shut himself down. But come to realize later, this is just a characteristic of a disability. Next characteristic is a general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. You'll find that these students are not happy. Um, uh, for the most part, they are. They're battling their own demons in their head, and they don't know how to express them as a typical person would express them. They don't know how to communicate, so sometimes that comes out in poor behavior. Again, part of their disability. And finally, it says a tendency to develop physical symptoms of fear associated with personal or school problems, and this is anxiety. Um, the worst students have, or I should say, the students with the worst behavior disability have the worst anxiety. They consistently worry. What are other people thinking about me? Am I being a distraction? On and on and on. And they associate fears and issues come up based off of these fears. Um, so, the National Alliance of Medical Illness has a phenomenal statement which states mental illnesses are medical conditions that disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functions. Just as diabetes is a disorder of the pancreas, mental illnesses are medical conditions that often result in a diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life. So in this, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, they compared behavior disorder to diabetes. Just as diabetes is the dysfunction of the pancreas, um, behavior disorder is a dysfunction in I guess you can say, in the brain, in whichever part of the brain is affected, and it causes this behavior. There's just like a diabetic, all they can do is try to treat themselves to either to if the diabetes is set in, to treat themselves, to give themselves the best form of life that they can during their life, or they can, if they're borderline, they can take the tools and the steps to rid themselves of the diabetes. It has been known to happen. It's the same thing with people with behavior disorder. They can either take the strategies to be successful in life and have the best life possible, or if it's borderline, they can struggle with might and main to rid themselves of this disability. But the point is that it's nothing that can be disciplined away. It only works, or it can only be affected through strategy. The history of behavioral disorder disability in the United States, it begins with the justice and students with disabilities came from the Civil Rights Act of 1964. During the Civil Rights Act, it opened up the conversation that in this country, one group of people was treated one way while another group of people was treated another way. Of course, when we mention the civil rights, you think about, African American community fighting for their rights, but also within that same act, you end up talking about people of different cultures, of different sexes, races, and creeds. But in the Civil Rights Act, disabilities was not mentioned yet. As the advancements in equality continued, we found that disabled people still were subject to discrimination in the school, and this brought about the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This law prohibited against uh, discrimination against public school students that had disabilities. This was a momentous act because at that time before, you had, the students didn't have anywhere to go. Some students with severe disabilities just were left out of school, and you simply can't have that. But this is what was happening prior to 1973. Then came the Rehabilitation Act. Inside of there was a section called 504. And 504 was for students with learning and attention issues, and how they can be assisted in the general education, and formed a curriculum for them, per se. These special needs were met with accommodations and modifications and other services. The accommodation and modifications, they may be extra time on tests. They may be, let's see here, the students might have the ability to write a paper on a computer rather than go in front of the class and do a book report. Like when I was in school, in middle school, we read a book and we would do a book report. The students with disabilities might be able just to write a paper, handwritten, computer written. I mean, there weren't computers back when there was computers, but we didn't have that kind of access to print out paper. I guess only those that really, really, really had the ability to do it, but most of us just hand wrote them. So those are just different accommodations that students with disabilities may have. Within this 504 plan, it was very successful in assisting students with disabilities because it gave them help. It made people say that, hey, these students need assistance. Let's assist them where we can. Let's make the education process available to all students. Still to this day, students that do not have severe disabilities or a recognized disability, maybe they have a learning issue. They have difficulty reading. Those are the students that will be affected by the 504 plan, and they'll be given assistance in the classroom. But we found that students with severe disabilities, they still needed further assistance. So this came from 1975 to 1990. There was the All Handicapped Children Act, and in 1990, this act was repealed and turned into the Individual with Disability Education Act, or IDEA. Now, IDEA covered several points. These points are very important. The first point is that the ideas is for students that were age 3 to 21. So when you say 3 to 21, first you immediately realize that, hey, there's no 3-year-olds in the there's no 3-year-olds in public school, and there's no 21-year-olds in public school either. So this opens up the range from pre-K programs, right, to after high school developmental programs. So where it opens a discussion that these students quite possibly need more assistance than the average student. Okay, So that from age 3 to 21, these students are looked at and they're given assistance. IDEA ensures that all students receive a free and appropriate public education. So this is called FAPE. So free and appropriate public education. So there's no more staying at home for students with severe disabilities. Every student from the age of 3 to 21 that has a disability now has a right by law to receive a proper education. It's the next point is the student is entitled to an evaluation in all areas of suspected disabilities. This is saying that for any age, if a disability is suspected, that they have the right to be tested. This becomes problematic from what I've seen because there's a lot of parents in elementary school that do not want to admit that their child has a disability. And part of educating people of disabilities is also educating them that there's nothing wrong with students that have disabilities. Unfortunately, that taboo still exists in our society, and it's for the purpose of you and I to rid those taboos in the society. Next, it says students must be included in a typical setting, educational setting with non-disabled students. And as we study, this is called inclusion. We give them the education, but we don't shoo them away in a corner trailer in the back of the school where nobody goes and sees them. And this is a fight going on today still. I've been in some schools where students with disabilities are shooed away in the back of the school and have very little interaction with the students. I disagree with it. I profoundly disagree. I disagree with it with every inch of my bones. But it happens, and we're fighting against that. So next is you have the parents. The according to IDEA, the parents' input is very, very, very important. And the teachers, the administration, the parents, and the students all have to come together to make a decision for what is best for the student. And this brings up the last point of the Individuals with Disability Education Act is the IEP. The IEP is like a 504 plan on steroids. It's created by administration, teachers, parents, and students. They all give their input in there. And it's an individual education plan. We test the students, we see what the goals are, and we aggressively come up with plans to assist the student to reach these goals. So an IEP, it's a program for every student that receives special education services. It's the law. It's not a maybe. It's the law. These students deserve it, and they must get it. It's a legal document that details the student's learning needs, the services the student will provide, and how progress will be measured. Again, IEPs are for students, as the 504 plan was, or the IDEA, says the ages 3 to 21. IEP plans are for students 3 to 22 because different states have different ages in which students can no longer attend the public schools. So it's from 3 to 22. It says, much like the 504 plan, accommodations and modifications are in the IEP, except that IEP are more specific to the student with disabilities educational goals. It's really pinpoint. I've sat in on a couple IEP meetings. Unfortunately, some of them the parents don't come to. It's something that we fight, but that's what we're here for. We're here to fight. Pick up the pace a little bit because I'm gonna run out of time soon. Let's see here. Including the IEP is special accommodations and modifications for students with disabilities. Success. A few of these accommodations are one-on-one adult assistance. That's what I am. I'm a one-on-one paraprofessional for the students with severe disabilities. They should be granted a one-on-one person to assist them through the school day, because the more severe disabilities, the harder it is for them to make it. Other accommodations of students with behavior disorder is extra time on quizzes, time on testing, especially state testing. These students with disabilities, they get flustered, they get frustrated, and they can't help it. So they need extra time. Don't rush them. You know, the point is we want them to have the knowledge to retain information. So with the more severe the disability, we give them extra time. Um, Another accommodation: the students may leave class early to avoid the business of the hallways. I know with my 12-year-old seventh grade student, that was so needed because he was in the classroom with other students at time in the hallways. Uh, He'd get in trouble, you know. So if he went to the bathroom and he said, you know, Mr. B, can I go to the bathroom? I'd let him go to the bathroom, and you know, sometimes I'd have to follow him to the bathroom because he'd end up in some kind of argument in the middle of the hallway. It was interesting, you know, but it is what it is. So it says if the disability greatly hampers the educational process, students with behavior disorder disability may receive modifications in instruction. Modifications such as one of the teachers did was they pre-printed the notes. There's a lot of anxiety keeping up with the classroom and keeping up with the teacher taking notes. So students that have certain disabilities, in this case behavior disability, to cut down on the anxiety, the teacher pre-prints her notes, and for those students that fall under and need these modifications, she gives them the pre-printed notes. It helps study, it helps the student, and it cuts down on the anxiety. Setting up personal goals and strategies, as well as a daily communication with parents about the educational process and behavioral process. So I know I keep a notebook, just a generic, you know, wire spiral notebook, and I take notes about their behavior. I take notes about the education, and every day I pretty much give a report to the parent. You know, either I've done it through text messages, I've done it through this piece of paper, just to keep the parent abreast of the situation, so that I know what's going on. So that I know, did this student, did they take their medication today? So that I know whether, you know, what they're going through. So it says recommendation. The next point is recommendation to promote understanding about behavior disorder. The first aspect of behavior disorder is to understand that this is a disability, like I mentioned before, and it's not behavioral. These issues cannot be disciplined away. Next, teachers must have an organized area. This is what I see is a problem time and time again. A master teacher is organized, is prepared. There's no downtime. They're consistently for 45, 50 minutes, however long the period is, they're moving their students along, and they're in charge of every moment. And this is the key to a master teacher. So there's little chances for anyone to get in trouble, especially students with behavior disabilities. And then strategies, educational strategies, behavior strategies, classroom management must be put in place and consistently followed. And this brings about stability in the classroom, and stability brings order. And all of these aspects in the classroom must be put together to assist students with behavior disability. So they have to be busy, they have to be tested, they have to be given accommodations, they have to be given modifications. Okay. And if you're a teacher, you're getting paid to do the best job. So you're getting paid to find a way to affect change and to educate the student. And they deserve an adequate education. Let's see here. The final part of my presentation is it's a book talk. How can I say it? Just well, let me finish up what I was thinking as far as the behavior disorder. Every student has the right to be comfortable, to feel loved, to be concerned, and to get an education. as an educator, you know, as an aspiring teacher who's been in the classroom, uh, you see that there's some of the student body that helps out students with disability, and there's some of the student bodies that are just plain mean. Um, and that's the world. And we're in this classroom for a reason. We're in this classroom because we want to help and we want to fight for these kids. So to do that, you know, we have to learn these disabilities. We have to learn, and then from that learning, we have to have compassion. And I've found the hardest students to deal with are behavior disorder, disability, because they talk back. Sometimes they don't understand what you're saying. They don't have patience. But we have to instill patience. We have to be patient for them. We have to be calm for them. We have to be organized for them. We have to do all of this for their success. So that's my presentation on the behavior disorder disability. Now we're going to move to the book talk. The book that I chose is Finding Audrey by Sophie Kinsella. Up here, this is the book. Phenomenal book. Didn't think I'd like it at first, but once I got into it, it had me cracking up. Let's see here. I chose this book for 3 reasons. I went to the library, you know, and I saw it and I started reading. I read the back cover, read a little bit, and I said, this is what I want. The reason why is I have a 16, should be 17 in a week, a 16-year-old daughter that suffers from anxiety. She's a control freak like her dad too, but her main thing is she suffers from anxiety. And it's important to me to understand the behavior, to understand, you know, because she gets so frustrated when people tell her, you just got to do it. And she's like, it's not that easy. And I suffer from anxiety too. And because of that, it's not that easy either. Secondly, being a man, I sometimes don't understand the issues that young ladies go through. So in hopes of being a master teacher, I'm trying to expand my horizons. So I'm reading books that are set for or that try to reach out to young teenage girls, because I have to understand what they're going through in their classroom so that I can be that teacher that they can come and talk to, and I can understand their plight as well as any other, you know, boy or any other student. You know, I have to get out of my norms as well if I want to be that effective teacher. And lastly, I want to express that anxiety is a disability. You know, I suffer from anxiety. You know, it's made parts of my life very difficult. My mother, who's a very stern woman, she's a beautiful woman, you know, but when my points of anxiety rear its ugly head, she used to fuss at me. I used to be an athlete, and my anxiety prevented, I can see it now, I couldn't see it then, but my anxiety prevented me from being the greatest athlete I could be. I have to admit that. So I want to learn more about anxiety. I want to learn more about behavioral disorders. And I found that through this book. So, well, let's get to the book. Finding Audrey by Sophie Kinsella. It's a novel about a 14-year-old girl who is living in London. And she suffers from severe anxiety. Her anxiety is so bad that she wears glasses inside, or sunglasses inside and outside, because she does not want to make eye contact with anyone, strangers, friends, or family. So that's how bad it is. Let's see here. The social anxiety, it affects her social life. You know, of course, people have, you know, oh, what are they thinking about me? Should I talk to this person? Should I talk to this person? So it always going to affect your social life, but it also affects her family life, and her school life. So throughout the story, it tells how all of these different things are affected by her anxiety. So one of the things that it's like the anxiety doesn't help, and it was hilarious in the story, is that Audrey, who is 14, is sandwiched between her 15-year-old brother, Frank, who is a gaming fanatic, and her 5-year-old brother, Felix, who just is in love with uh, Frank, and he just kind of eggs on everything and repeats what people say, and it's kind of frustrating to Audrey, but it's hilarious when you read about it. Uh, but through it all, Audrey finds her way of being invisible between the two. Um, and in the story, there's a constant goings on in her house because she has it's not obnoxious, but she has a domineering alpha mother who is enraged that her son Frank is nothing but a gamer. She wants him to be so much more, but all he does is game. And Frank tries to tell her that I can make money being a gamer, and he's like, I don't care. You're not gonna make money being a gamer. And there's the book opens up, with the mom holding the laptop outside of the window, threatening to drop it, and Frank is pleading with all of his life for her not to drop it. And then comes in Dad. Dad is kind of I don't know if he's beat down, I don't know what, but he's kind of the passive aggressive guy that tries to talk to the mom, and she talks over him, but he still stays calm through it all, and knows that we're gonna figure this out. So he's like the calming, passive aggressive household, and it's just chaos. And Audrey finds a way to find her small corner out the way. And so that dynamic of the book is lovely. It's hilarious. It's crazy. It's Audrey is attempting to battle her anxiety and develop a social life. And being a teenager in my time and having a teenage girl and a teenage boy, that social life is very difficult. And it comes with a bunch of obstacles and a bunch of drama, which breeds anxiety. So she has help with a boy named Linus, and she has a secret crush on Linus, and she wants to know if Linus has a secret crush on her. And I'm not gonna say love affair because only 14 years old, but their relationship is very cute. It's very adorable, and it's sweet to see how Linus deals with her anxiety and tries to pull her out of her shell, because he's trying to tell her that I like you, everything's okay. And Audrey's like, I'm a turtle in my shell. If I come out, I might get hurt. This doesn't feel right. And she's staying in her shell of her anxiety. So the major scene of the book, and I take it as the I don't know, the climax. Yeah, the climax was a simple when Audrey was supposed to meet Linus at Starbucks, and she tells blow by blow her fear and anxiety as she gets out of the car, as she walks across the parking lot, as she walks into Starbucks, as she orders, as she sits down, as Linus comes in, and all of her thoughts, and you're just like, wow, how is this young lady thinking all of this? But it shows a accurate depiction of someone with severe anxiety. So you're learning with somebody who may be diagnosed with behavior disorder, may be going through. So it's very interesting and very good to read that aspect of the book. So eventually Linus helps Audrey through her anxieties and greatly reduces her episode. So it doesn't get rid of them because, again, it's a disability. But they greatly reduce, and that's important. Also, her home life is improved as mom and dad come to terms with Frank and his gaming obsession, and they turn a negative to a positive, and then the whole family begins to game. So I guess you could say it's like the modern day Monopoly, where people don't really sit around the dinner table and play Monopoly. Now everybody's sitting around the TV playing a game together. And lo and behold, Audrey was one of the family members that was gaming. So she didn't find a place in the house to hide. You know, her anxiety is starting to reduce, and you're seeing that as she's out in the family, and they're all gaming. So you have the combination of friendship, um, relationship, family, love, patience, strategy. All of these different aspects are touched on in this book, Finding Audrey, and I found that it was a very beautiful book um, to read, and I've actually recommended it to my daughter, and I'm going to give it to her and let her read it and enjoy it. So that's my presentation. It's about 36 minutes long, it's looking like, and I hope that you enjoy. Thank you.